My name is Stanley Sword, and I have the great pleasure to welcome Jim Brosnahan, one of the 30 best trial lawyers in America. And in 2001, you were awarded the best trial lawyer. Tell us, you've been practicing law for over 60 years, and if you were to, need a lawyer yourself, how would you pick it out? What should you look after when you are in need of a lawyer?
Well, I'd certainly study them and see what cases they handled. I have a simple, if it was a trial, I have a simple rule, and that is, does this person win a lot? And everything else is interesting, but do they win a lot? And what kind of cases have they taken? Especially if I need a specific kind of a case, have they done some of those? And do they teach, for example? Do they take time to help younger lawyers? I'd be very supportive of somebody like that, and I would probably want to talk to them, and they would say to me what I said to so many clients, so many lawyers that I represented. If I represent you, I'm the lawyer and you're the client. I actually got a little Chinese piece of pastry that you opened it, and it had a little message in it, and it said, Brosnahan is the lawyer and you are the client. I would give that to lawyers who I represented. So yeah, judgment is important, which is honed by experience. The gestation period for a lawyer takes a while. So those are some of the things I would look for.
And today there's 1.33 million lawyers in the US. Why should people move into law? Is there really need for another one? And what should be the driving forces, you think?
Well, there's always room for another lawyer, I hope, based on teaching my students, at Berkeley Law. But I think that, first of all, you take the whole group that are counseling corporations, and those are a lot. That's a lot of lawyers that never go into the courtroom and who are often wonderful counselors, and with good judgment. There are the troubleshooters, there are the arbitrators who are lawyers, there are the litigators who do a lot of civil litigation. There are the trial lawyers that try cases. The number of trials has been reduced, as you probably know, which I think is in some ways unfortunate. But the trial lawyers are my favorite group, if I may, and they are different. They will undertake representations of people who might be despised at that moment, and they'll just do it. Public defenders do that in the United States every day. They go in, somebody murders somebody, and there's this person, and there may not be a nice person. There's the public defender representing them. And I've known public defenders who do that for 30 years. So I think that we don't have extra lawyers in a country that is very rights dominated, which is true today. No matter what any of us may read in the paper about America, we are very rights dominated. And a lot of things that have happened in the last 10 years were all about rights. Well, rights and lawyers go together.
And in the courtroom, is it like a Greek tragedy, or if we look at your 150 trial cases, is that like a heavyweight boxer where you see all the knockouts and you see when it's a close call and
Well, I tried to avoid tragedies. That was my job, We don't want a tragedy. But it's very exciting. You don't know what's going to happen next. The witness suddenly says something and the case changes. And the jury is sitting there. If you assume you have 12 jurors, uh, you have participated a little bit in selecting them based on your research because you think that they will help you win the case. That's both sides are doing. That's what we do. And the judge, every judge is different. Some are, uh, if I may say, more learned than others in the subject matter, but many judges have good instincts too, and so the excitement of it has never. The only boring cases are the little drug cases where this sad person on the street corner sells it to an agent, and then they send that over to the chemist, and the chemist testifies and all that, and it's just really dull case. But that's very rare. So the excitement is great, and I tell young lawyers, and I have students that are desirous of being trial lawyers. They talk to me, should they do it? Yes, they should do it because it's a good life. It's a very good life.
And when you're in court during a day, how does a day look like? Do you have any routines? Do you drink 3 cups
Yes,
of coffee?
I have routines, but they tend to disintegrate at certain times. But yes, okay, I'm up at 6. Have a brief breakfast with my wife Carol, who's the judge. Go to court, get there early. So I'm in the cafeteria of the courthouse at 7 o'clock, and then I have a witness coming in, maybe two, maybe more, and then at 9 o'clock we start in the courtroom. We go to 12. We come back at 1:30, depending on the judge's hours. We stop at 4 or 5 or 6. Then I work till about 7:30 or 8, and then I go home, visit a little bit with the family, read a book for 15 minutes by Yeats or someone to remind me that I am actually still a human being. It isn't all about this case. That I'll end with the deviation when it's a big case and I'm going to give the final argument the next day. And I always get some sleep, but it might be 3 hours or 4 hours. And I have thought I had a case involving an Irish person, and it was very important that we win it. And in fact, we did. But the night before, I was just sitting in our music room, totally aware of what would happen to him if we lost. And you carry those burdens. You want to know what law is about? It's about carrying other people's burdens.
Mm.
Lawyers almost never
Like Jesus.
created the problem, it just came to their office.
Mm. And if you were to become a philosopher, because you read philosophy at Berkeley, and you would write a chapter about the essence of a trial lawyer, what is the red dots that connects you all?
I think it was Habermas who doubted central planning. And trial lawyers are not sure necessarily that this law is a good idea, or in the alternative, they're sure their client didn't do it, or in bad cases, they wish their client hadn't done it. So going up against the powerful, which public defenders do every day. I mean, the community wants a conviction. This is a terrible murder in Oakland. The community is upset, and that lawyer goes in there and doesn't care about that. They care. I mean, you do care, but you just have to do your job. And that's a tradition in the United States that goes back to the colonies and to some terrific lawyers. One I'm thinking of that fought for free speech, that you could say anything you wanted to say, about the governor of New York. And that case was tried, and it stands as a very important thing. You know, you look around the world, you can't say what you want about the leaders in countries. Today, a lot of countries, you can think of them, your viewers can think about those countries. You can't say what you want. But in the United States, within law, within rules, you can be a dissenter. And the country has a lot of dissenters.
And you went to Harvard Law School. What would be your three best pieces of advice for young people today who want to become lawyers?
I think I do actually have a list of things that might help, especially if it's trial law. But if you're competitive, that helps. If you're curious, intellectually curious about things, you want to learn about things, new things, then litigation certainly is an avenue for a continuing fulfillment of your curiosity about how this machine is made, how this person's knee will never work again, you name it. So I'd say if you're curious and competitive and want to keep learning about lots of different things, then I think it's very appealing. But when I say that, I have in mind lots of students. I have one student this year who wants to be a professor, and that's a wonderful thing too. So there's great many avenues you can follow if you become a lawyer.
Mm. And during your 150 trial cases, which is your biggest win and which is your biggest defeat?
The biggest win was when we beat the British government. Brosnahan is an Irish name. The Brosnahans came from a town about as big as your house. And we left during the hunger. And I understand Irish history. I do. I read 2 or 3 books a year on Irish history. And in this case, and I'll keep this short, but they sought to take a person back to Northern Ireland, and they would have killed him. Let me repeat that. They would have killed him. And we fought that extradition, and we won it. We finally got a letter from the Attorney General of England that they no longer sought this person anymore. And I think for personal reasons, that case probably meant the most to me, although, you know, you get in every case is important. I've been talking as long as I could to avoid the second part of your question, which is what was my greatest defeat? I think it was the sanctuary trial held in Tucson, Arizona. I was defending a 60-year-old Mexican widow, an active member of the Catholic Church, who was helping refugees coming from Central America in the 1980s. And our view was that she was giving them sanctuary following her Bible, and that's what she was doing. And the trial, as I say, was 6 months long, and the judge was against us. He just was against us, and finally, it was a mixed verdict. There were some acquittals and 2 convictions of my client. But then at the sentencing, she rose to the occasion, and by being very nice to the judge, but looking at the ceiling and saying, basically in her Spanish, she only spoke Spanish, that, Judge, you and I live in different worlds. She followed her religion and she got probation, which in a way some people might think was a victory. But that was the hardest thing to take. And at that moment, that night, the night of the verdict, and a couple of days thereafter, I thought seriously about giving up the law. I thought, no, this is not right. So that was the hardest one, I think.
And which is your biggest strength in the courtroom, and which is the things you could still improve at?
You
Which
can
are your
improve on
weakness?
everything. Yeah, and the fact that you were a certain way when you're 45 doesn't mean you're the same way when you're 70, in your 70s. And so you're always improving, hopefully. I think that's important, and that's an advantage. But I'll give you an example. Early on, I realized I needed to know a lot more psychology. The law is all about psychology, people's assumptions, people's mental images, what they think the world is and what the world is not. Truth, the philosophers, there are some that kind of deny there is any such thing. It's a wonderful subject to, if you want to frighten yourself, you can read those books. But the ability, I think, to just keep going, and I would give credit for some of the sports that I played. It was a long time ago. But I played 3 sports in high school and I played 2 sports in college. And you just get used to that. And you win and you lose. And you understand that. And you improve. You're always improving. You're always working on your skills. That's not the only way you develop those traits, but it's one way to develop it.
And do you ever dream at night about different cases turning out in other ways, or nightmares about law?
That's fascinating because that's going on right now in my head. Last night, the nights I'm in some kind of a process. I haven't lost that many cases. I've been fortunate in a lot of ways, um, including the support from my firm, Morrison Forrester. But yeah, I have very graphic dreams and have had them now for several years. I'm always in a conference room. The client is there. We got this problem. The most common one, and I've talked to friends who have dreams like this who are in different occupations. I'm about to walk into the courtroom and I have no idea what this case is about. I have done no preparation. I don't know if this is a civil case, criminal case, whatever. And they're very vivid dreams. There's a judge and kind of a composite of judges I've known. And there's the client asking me, do you know what's going to happen? And I kind of don't know what's going to happen. So that's a lawyer's nightmare.
And when you started out, you made $300 a month in Phoenix, and in the end, you billed $1,200 an hour. Is it hard as a lawyer when you're making really good money not to work too much? Because when you're an entrepreneur, you can grow the company without growing, too much. You don't sell your hours in that sense.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody will believe this, but it's been my state of mind. And I think my wife would probably support this if she were with us here at the moment. And I never cared about the money. A couple of my partners were suspicious that I didn't care about the money, but we I mean, to be blunt, we made a lot of it. I mean, we made a lot of money, and which is good. You need it to work at a certain level of law, and that's all fine. But I never the money. Um, I wasn't doing it for the money. And I
Mm,
think I read a lot of advice from people in the newspapers, magazines, so on. Find something you love to do. What do you love to do? I had a good friend in during my college days, and he wanted to be a piano player. He was very good. He played jazz. He played cool jazz. He was wonderful at it.
mm.
And his father wanted him to be a lawyer. Uh, well, I lost touch with him. I don't know what happened. I hope he became a pianist. I hope he did because
Mm,
he loved it.
mm.
Well, I liked the law from day one. Day
And as
one,
a
I liked it, and that's important.
as a trial lawyer, did you have a unique style in the courtroom? You know, if we blurred out your face, could we see was Jim there? Do you differ from other trial
Yeah,
lawyers?
it changes so much. Actually, I could get put on a pretty good outrage if necessary. I could use emotion if necessary. I could be very quiet when that was appropriate, very respectful when that's appropriate. You become this chameleon with different ways of communicating. Um, I think I would try to be reasonable, certainly with judges. And I teach my students empathy, not just empathy for the client, which is terribly important, understanding their problems, trying to deal with someone else's problem. That's the heart of lawyering. It's what lawyers do every day. But also empathy for the jury. They've got a problem. The lawyers couldn't solve the case. They couldn't settle it. Now 12 people are supposed to decide it. That's their problem. The judge has a problem. And what are those problems? He may be handling 50 cases that day, and you want to talk for 2 hours? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. So you have to have empathy for just about everybody else, and that's not a bad thing for your development over the years.
Mm. And for the coming decades, in 25 years, how do you think, occupation as a lawyer and the law in America will change?
I think it's a great time for a lawyer in America who loves civil liberties, who loves equality, and who is prepared to stand on their feet, man or woman, in public and demand the rights of clients. I think the next 25 years will tell the story of America. And we have a story to tell. We have a constitution. It provides rights. After 2,000 years, after Plato was of the opinion that democracy really wouldn't work, our founders put together a government that has worked now for over 200 years. We have a message here in the United States, and it's not necessarily the one that you see on television. And lawyers very often are dissenters. That's very often our job. You want to hang this person? Hold on a minute. Just hold on a minute. So I think if you look at a desire for equality and a desire for rights of all kinds, then I think America right now is a great place to be a lawyer and will be the next 25 years. I tell my students, I don't know if they believe me or not, but it's true. If I could start all over, if I could get a job in the law for $300 a month right now, I don't know how I'd eat actually, but I would do it. I would start again.
Mm,
And I'm sincere about that.
mm. And uh, does it differ, between the East Coast and the West Coast? And and the mountain region in the midst of America, uh, being a lawyer and
I
being
think
a
so.
client?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a lot of differences. The one that irks me the most is on the East Coast, the sports writers go to sleep before the West Coast teams have played. Okay, so they, I mean, I didn't just make that up. I mean, I really, that's my bias. They don't really understand what we're doing out here, and there's a little bit of that in the government. You know, California, where I live and practice, did practice, uh, is the fifth largest economy in the world. We are, can I repeat it? We are the fifth largest economy in the world. And we do that with 2 million undocumented people. Now, my bias, my West Coast bias, which I'm confessing right here in your interview, is I wish they in Washington would pay more attention to the question, how do we do that? Just how do you have the fifth largest economy and you have 2 million undocumented people? How does that work? Did I mention we have a surplus in our state budget this year right now? So you asked an interesting question that unleashed my West Coast bias. Um, I think the middle of the country is understandable because I think there's certain fundamentals that they believe in. They believe in independence. They believe in uh, sort of the rights of people. There may be guns and so forth, but they believe in rights. But also there are differences, political opinions of the day, uh, um, from day to day, important questions where those political issues are different.
And you've been working in Japan and China during your working for big companies in San Francisco in the tech area. Uh, how do you see America compared to, you know, Europe and compared to other parts of the world? Which is your strength in your legal system and which is the weaknesses?
Well, you know, as I mentioned to you, you were in Sweden, and in 1912, um, your constitution provided lawyers for people who can't afford a lawyer. And we don't have that in the United States. And that's starting with a problem. That's a terrible problem. And I've been in courts. I could tell you stories about fairly uneducated people who have no lawyer, and they're in court, and the issue is whether they can stay in their house. The issue is whether they can have custody of their children. Now, I have to immediately say an awful lot of lawyers and an awful lot of judges work terribly hard to solve that problem, but it's a huge problem in terms of the legal system.
Mm.
And it's been my whole life. I got interested in that issue in 1962 when a lawyer was appointed for a man who was charged with murder. And so at least he got a lawyer, but I got interested in the issue, and it's still a serious issue.
And in Europe, there's a lot of fear when you export to the US, you know, to get sued or to sit at boards in American companies and such. Do you think the fear is overrated, or is there concern for different parts moving into the states? The
It's
aggressive legal
yeah,
system.
yes, it's been great, and I lived through a period where Japanese clients were coming to the United States for the first time, and it was the uh, late 70s and early 80s.
When it started
And
Nike, for example.
well, yeah, and
Yeah.
and you know, in Japan, as I understand it, the government is corporation's friend. So if you get in trouble, you have difficulty, the government's going to help you, right? And I'm simplifying this, but it was true. When you come to the United States and they're going to prosecute you for something, the government is not your friend. And so I had to try to convince Japanese clients, and we had in the firm, we've always had a number of them, that the government is not your friend. They're going to indict you for something because we have a law. The law is unending in terms of criminals. So that was a good example. I have been involved in and watched the development of legal relations between the United States and China. We have 3 offices in China, and I've been out there. I've done a little bit of teaching out there and so forth. And the systems are so different. I just expounded on rights in America. China is a different country with regard to that. I respect a lot of what China has been able to do. I've seen examples of it. But the ability to coordinate the law with regard to the United States and China is very interesting. One of the companies this week had to submit to giving the information of the customers to the Chinese government. Of course, that's happened in the United States too, but it's under discussion. And those are dramatic influences for the future in the effect. And the NBA, our basketball league, got involved with China about certain conditions that the Chinese government wanted to place on the NBA. And the difference is, I think, things like that lead to tremendous discussion in the United States.
And if you're an entrepreneur moving to America, which is your best advice to stay out of the courtrooms, other than being on the right side of the law? Is there a way to stay
Yeah.
safe, so to say?
Oh, sure. And you recently, a little while ago, you asked about all these lawyers. Although a lot of those lawyers are working every day, all day, to keep the company officials out of criminal practice. My experience, with a few exceptions, is that CEOs and others want to avoid criminal procedure. On the other hand, they want to beat the opposition. They want to keep their market share. They want to pull together more companies, even though newly revitalized antitrust interest in Europe and in the United States is suddenly again an issue. More so in Europe, actually, than here. So they want to merge, but the problem is that would give them 57% of the market. So they've got to adjust to that. But my experience was that CEOs pretty much want to do it. The problem arises at a lower level when if it's disclosed that this pill causes cancer. The middle manager or the upper middle manager in the company is going to lose his job. And that's a moral issue right there, not just a legal issue. If people will die, and then you have very sophisticated, nuanced kind of things, which is, and we had it recently with the virus, this pill will help a lot of people, but some people will die with some offshoot of it. And the scientists get used to balancing the good and the bad and all of that. So I'm not sure if a business person is going to come from Europe to the United States, they're going to find it that hard. I do think even to this day, if a Chinese, right now, for a lot of reasons, if a Chinese company is going to come to the United States, then they need to be very careful, I think. It's the way I would put it.
Jim, warm thank you, and we look forward to your continued journey, and you're writing your book in the years to
Yep.
come.
Yep.
Stay
Yep.
safe now, and warm thank you for generous advice
Thank you so much.
from 60 years of law. Thank you.